everybody. Welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Corner. My name is Pagan, and today I am joined by a very awesome author, and she is the author of Mexican Sorcery, Laura Davila. Did I pronounce that
Mm,
correctly?
Yes,
Awesome.
Laura Davila. Yes.
Awesome. Laura, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here. And everybody who's listening, I loved Laura's book. It was so good and so informative, especially about something that we don't get to hear a lot about in that part of the world. So, Laura, welcome to the show. How are you?
Really good. How are you?
I am doing very well, thank you. So, like I was saying, your book is really, really good. It was one of the ones that I was super excited to read because I grew up in northern New Mexico. And so I was used to those kinds of cultural references of the Mexican and Hispanic cultures. And it was really kind of fun to read because I don't live in that part of the country anymore. And I was like, this is kind of like going home for me to read this book, which is really nice. But what originally inspired you to write the book?
Oh, well, it was a lot of things. You know, it for me was a way to preserve this tradition. You know, another thing that made me do it was to make like a point about there is not a single way to do Mexican magic or Mexican brujeria. Mexico is really big,
Mhm.
is huge, and just like witchcraft is rely and magic relying a lot of the flora and the fauna and the ecosystem and the environment, even the weather. The magic that you will do in the south is not the same magic that you will be doing in northern Mexico, that is more like a desert.
Mhm.
So that was one of the reasons, because a lot of Mexican Americans were like, you know what, it's just so confusing because there is several books and all of them have a different approach. And I'm like, well, everybody is talking about what their ancestors did, but all of our ancestors used to live in different parts of Mexico. So that,
Yes.
that has a lot to do with that. So in Mexican sorcery, I try to put at ease that, sense of, oh my God, I'm not doing it right, or oh my God, I'm appropriating, or oh my God, I'm doing it wrong. So that was, mainly my goal, to
Mhm.
make everybody more comfortable to, dive in and, explore and learn.
I think that that is beautiful, and I love the fact that there was a section in your book, and I think you mentioned it a couple of times, but there was a section in your book that basically talked about the fact that anybody can practice this. It doesn't matter really
Yeah.
your walk of life, where you come from, because if you're called to it to practice it, then you can practice it, which I thought was really interesting. And, obviously some of the people are like, no, you can't practice this because it's, family traditions, it's passed on through lineage. And what are your kind of thoughts on, the differences between the family lineages and those practices versus the practice as a whole?
Well, uh, I I inherited that from my grandparents and my great grandparents, and I have done a lot of work,
Mhm.
with other elders, and one of the things that it used to make me really sad is when I started to sharing in the community that it was a lot of gatekeeping. And I
Mhm.
was like, I really don't understand, why, why that jealousy, that you know that doing the job that the spirit should be doing.
Right.
How I'm going to make the spirit's job if I need those spirits to set the boundaries spiritually that I cannot do in my life because I do it through them. Why I'm not going to trust them you know to choose and pick, and so it was like really hard for me, and really like sad, because I was like, what about, in the next two generations, the ones that are going to get gatekeeped from these
Mhm.
is my grandchildren
Right.
because they don't speak Spanish or because they look whiter. I don't know. So I talked with one of my elders, and he was like, you know what, you are sharing this and you are not gatekeeping, and you're like so welcoming because it's not humanly possible to share something that you don't think is yours.
I agree with
Is
that,
oh,
yeah.
so in your mind, in your heart, and you feel that I belong to this,
Mhm.
and this belongs to me. So it's so easy for you to share it. But somebody who probably is very disconnected or had never put a foot in Mexico, is going to be really jealous and try to accaparate all that knowledge
Right, absolutely.
because so that's how I understood that poster that I don't share and I'm not agree with.
Mhm.
So that was like an eye opening on why people in Mexico are so welcoming, and why people from there are always sharing, and here is a lot of gatekeeping, and here is a lot of secrecy. I don't know how to describe it, but is that
Yes.
that I didn't understood, and it makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense, and, the gatekeeping that kind of happens, a lot, especially in the US, I think stems from a lot of the gatekeeping kind of mentality that happened in, the early 90s, especially around the big Wiccan movements and stuff like that, and everyone's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I don't wanna share this," and, "Oh, you have to, be a certain level to understand how this works," and the truth is, anybody who's listening to that, that level doesn't exist. None of that exists.
Mhm.
If you want to learn something, unless it is something that is specific to a culture that
Yeah.
is their culture and you can't go into their culture unless you're a part of it,
Yeah,
that's something
absolutely.
that you should not touch. Everything else
And
is totally okay.
absolutely, there is a lot of Latin American traditions that they require an initiation, but it's
Mhm.
not the case for Brujeria de Rancho.
Right.
So I totally respect and other traditions across Latin America that require a certain process and then an initiation in excuse me
Mhm.
initiation, but this is not just again this is not the case for Brujeria de Rancho, hechicería is just in a lot of parts of Mexico common knowledge,
Right.
folk knowledge. So and it's funny because people doesn't understand either that a lot of these practices rely a lot in history.
Mhm.
And I had one time talking about that gatekeeping, somebody who was so excited about Mexican sorcery because it used to reminded her what the things that her grandma did.
Right.
And she posted about it, and she got a lot of backslash because she's not Mexican. She has like Philippine,
Mhm.
as like ancestors, and somebody just scolded her. And I was like, do you know, like the part of the Mexico that I come from? Yes, it was conquered by the Spanish, but it was conquered by the Tlaxcaltecs because the Chichimecs in that area were not like the Aztecs. They fought over 300 years,
Mhm.
and the same Tlaxcaltecs and the same Spaniards went to the Philippines. So pretty much we're like brothers from another mother.
Yes.
That's why she, she relies and she relates a lot on what is right in the book. How dare you? Like, if you don't know the story, the history about Filipinas or the northeastern part of Mexico, how are you even calling her out?
Right. And
Probably she has more right to that than you. That is, you're like from the south, a Mexican from the south.
mhm.
So, which is funny, but that's why I'm totally against gatekeeping, because I think the spirits should do that job, and probably we're gatekeeping people who have more right to those traditions than even the gate person gatekeeping. You know what I'm saying?
I do
It's
know what
just
you're
nuts.
saying, and I completely agree with that. And the interesting thing about that too is if we continue to gatekeep these practices, they're going to get lost in time. Eventually, there will be
Exactly.
nobody to practice them because there will be nothing left. And
Hello.
we also don't know everybody's lineage. And unless you're looking at somebody's family tree, you have no room to talk about anybody's family lineage about anything. You don't know
And
how they
that's
ended
the
up where
other
they ended
thing.
up.
Then that's the thing. The sense of belonging and the right of belonging to a culture is not only by birth, it's by marriage,
Hmm.
by adoption, and even by love. I mean, come on. That's something that had always been that way in Mexico.
And
If if people want to make it otherwise, they're Americanizing that. It's
yes.
just
And the funny thing too is that not only is it about all of those aspects of family that you talked about, but I do find that there are people out there who, yes, are born into certain families that are not culturally aspect. They don't have any of that in there, but they also are adopted by friendships and
yeah.
spirit and connection with other people. And those people are like, it's like, I remember when I was a kid, one of the Hispanic moms who I grew up with her son, every time I would see her, she would basically call me her daughter, even though I wasn't.
Mija,
And
mija.
yes,
Uh-huh.
mija. And so she would treat me as if I was one of her own kids. And
Yes.
she claimed me as one of her own, even though I was not biologically related in any shape or form. But she claimed me as one of her own because I was friends with her son. And that
Exactly.
was,
That's who we are.
yes.
So otherwise, it wouldn't be us. And that's something that I'm trying to do. There is a lot of stories, there is a lot of messages that they're not being cherished and
Hmm.
shared because people is afraid to be call it called out by
Right.
somebody, like, oh, judged. Oh, this is not how it's supposed to do, or this is not supposed to be shared, or this is not the way that you're saying. You know, we're losing a lot of cultural treasures.
Hmm.
And for me, that Mexican sorcery was a way of welcoming and to, like reclaim that for this side of, you know, um, the border,
Hmm.
because I'm from Mexico. So, yeah, it was, totally out of love and totally thinking about my descendants.
I think that that is beautiful. And I'm so thankful that you did that because, we don't want to lose any of our practices, no matter what walk of life you choose, whether it be the Mexican sorcery aspect, whether it be a Norse pagan, whether it be a Celtic pagan, whether it doesn't matter. Wherever you end up, if you are called to be there by spirit, by connection to a force in the universe that we just can't explain because our human brains can't wrap around it, wherever you're supposed to be, that's where you're supposed to end up. The universe is going to call you exactly where you're supposed to be. And nobody has the rights unless, like I said, it's a cultural thing. Outside of
Yeah.
that, nobody has the right to tell you no, you don't belong.
Hmm.
And so I think that, at the end of the day, we're all people of this earth and we all deserve to welcome each other as family. And that's one thing I love about the Hispanic and Mexican cultures. They welcome everybody as family. Everybody. It doesn't matter. They're like, you walk into one of their houses and they're like, have you eaten today?
Mi casa es su casa. Yeah. I will fix you a
It's
plate.
like,
Exactly.
if you're
That's
hungry, let
how
me
we
feed
are.
you. Let me take care of you. Do you need a place to stay? That's the kind of culture that I grew up around. And it was a beautiful culture. It is a beautiful culture. And your book reflects all of that, which is gorgeous. And it also reflects the spiritual manner of it as well. The other really fun analogy that I kind of found with your book is I'm a very big fan of Jake Richards, who writes Appalachian folklore books. And your book was like taking all of that folklore that he writes about and putting it in a Mexico or a Mexican kind of aspect. And it was, they mirrored each other, which was really cool. And I'm just like, apparently folklore is
Yeah,
just folklore across the board.
exactly. I was hearing another podcast yesterday about hoodoo and a legend about Juan el Conquistador. That
Mhm.
is a herb, and how all that story that he got in love with the devil's daughter. And it was an amazing story, but that's how we create magical links with things. And that doesn't only happen in Appalachian, it happens in Hoodoo, it happens in Brujeria de Rancho, it happens in a lot of traditions. And storytelling is one of my favorite things to share,
Mhm.
knowledge, to share witchcraft, to share magic. So yeah, absolutely. I try to even like put the story and put the songs that they
Mhm.
were made after that story. So is just very magical.
It is a very magical experience, and the stories that come out of Mexican culture are gorgeous stories that I don't think are cherished enough. I think that again, there might be some gatekeeping, and I know that there's some obviously cultural issues that come with that, but beyond that, I think that the stories should be kind of brought to the forefront, and you do that very well in your book. You bring a lot of the beautiful stories, and I know there's hundreds more that, obviously you couldn't fit into a book, but
Yeah,
there's so many, and they're gorgeous stories, and they're captivating stories, and you get to hear about all these different aspects of how things came into being, how spirits came into being, and some of them are spooky, some of them are fun that way, some of them are beautiful in other ways, but they should be cherished. And, I was very fortunate growing up in northern New Mexico getting to learn a lot of these stories, but my experience was only a tip of an iceberg. And what is in your book is also a tip of an iceberg. Some of the stories in your book I had never heard, but there's hundreds that don't get passed down and they don't get shared enough. And, as somebody who loves history and loves culture and all of these things, I do fear that they will get lost to time and they
absolutely.
won't be able to be shared.
One of the things that was, how social media, internet,
Mhm.
you know, um, works right now. Like if people doesn't agree with something or they don't like something, they like just plain cancel your book
Yes.
and you. I have seen that happen with a lot of books. I have seen happen with a lot of authors.
Mhm.
So for me was like, oh, I already know there is not a lot of Mexican Americans who think like me. So I know, you know, I'm going to have probably some issues, but it was totally a surprise that it, I have had like minimal like observations or
Mhm.
criticism. I have I was like ready for that, but I wasn't ready to get all the praise that the book had received, which is very hard and very difficult because that's what I tell everybody. I don't feel like I made the book. I didn't invent these stories.
Mhm.
These stories were told to my great grandmothers,
Mhm.
So none of like la cuerva de la petaca, the crow, the petaca sorceress, or the bruja de la Huasteca, the Huasteca witch. They're not my original stories. That
Mhm.
stories that even have like corridos, guapangos, like songs about it, because they're vox populi. Same thing with El Charro Negro. That's a thing that our great grandparents had been like sharing those stories. And I feel like, oh my God, I'm receiving a lot of praise of something that I don't feel like I create. It was just there, and I feel like I only like rescue it.
Yeah.
Like I just dust it off, and the only I that's what I tell everybody. The only original story, the one that it really happened, is the one where Don Beto in the cemetery just told me all that, and I got lost. That's my story. But otherwise, those stories, they're stories that they were, you know, told to me, when I was a kid. And even though a lot of people here doesn't know them, if you go to my hometown, everybody will be like, everybody knows that. You know what I'm saying? I
But
mean, you don't
you're
know the song,
introducing it to a whole new
it's weird.
audience.
So it's just kind of like, oh, how can I take that praise? Because, you know,
I think it's great though that you're introducing those stories to a whole new audience of
yeah.
people from Mexico, Americans, and people around the world as well. So you're introducing them to a culture that they may be unfamiliar with. You're introducing them to stories that they're unfamiliar with. And whether or not they're your
Mhm.
stories, you're preserving them in history by writing them into your book. And the cool thing is too, you were talking about that you were prepared for all this hate and you were not prepared for this book to be as successful as it was. I can tell you that from the moment the book was released, it has been
Oh my
everywhere.
God.
Everywhere. I don't know how many posts. Every time I turn around, there is a post with your book on it. There's TikTok videos with your books in it. There is it's everywhere. It is everywhere. People have bought it, people are reviewing it, people are talking about it, they are praising it, they're excited for it. So you have done this really great
Oh,
thing. And this is that moment, everybody in the podcast, where I'm going to do that shameless plug. Go buy Laura's book. It's really great. It is a wonderful book. It has such great stories in it and so much wonderful folklore in it that I think you will absolutely love. Go buy it if you haven't already done so. There's my shameless plug for the day, everyone. But yeah, your book
yeah,
is
I'm very
everywhere.
happy.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, it was like a baby that I didn't know how people was going to react, but now I feel like it has a lot of aunts and uncles, and everybody is waiting for another baby now. And I'm like, no, there is a lot of stories like these about brujas and about hechiceras and about shapeshifters in
Mhm.
Mexico. We have like abundance, and that's something that I make fun of it too, because I tell like other authors and
Mhm.
other content creators and other elders, like, dude, not even if we put ourselves to write a book every year among all of us, we will
Mhm.
be able to put everything on writing.
It's very true. It's absolutely true. There's so many stories, so many legends, and so many, tales and fables, whatever you would like to label them as. There's so many that, truthfully, I don't think you all could ever put them into writing. Not truly. And I think you should. I think you should share as many as you
Yeah,
possibly can.
that's why I'm like, hey, make everybody to keep sharing those stories, because we're like very little, into the publishing world of Mexican magic.
Mhm.
So we need these, otherwise we're going to lose it.
I think
So
that that's such a really great thing. Which brings me to my next question. Do you have any other books that you're working on that you want to talk about?
uh yeah, well, yeah, I'm working right now in another book. It Jurica told me like 1 year.
Mhm.
1 year from now, pretty much. And it's more of the same, but I think this one is a little bit like more modern.
Mhm.
And is a lot of folklore too, a lot of stories and magic. And I'm very, very excited with this next project that is you know right now
I
in the
love it.
oven.
I absolutely love it. I'm so excited for it. I cannot wait to see what you put into the next book because, again, there's so many stories. They're all so good. Even if you just wrote a Mexican, story or folklore book of just all the stories and broke them down, everybody would love it, and I guarantee we would all eat it up. So if you want to add that to your book list, you totally could. I think that would be fantastic. But yeah, there's so many great things. Now, my kind of final question for you is, do you have any classes that you teach or anything like that where people could connect with you, learn about this, kind of a more hands-on experience versus just reading the book?
Well, I have a Patreon. So, some months I'm just pausing it because English is not my first language.
Mm-hmm.
I came here to the United States 12 years ago, and I really struggle a lot to put my thoughts on writing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I have ADHD, I'm dyslexic, and top, like, English is my second language. So I try to do classes through events. Right now, we have one in May. You can check it on my Instagram.
Okay.
I'm continuously like sharing it, and my Patreon is on my link. I think that's
Linktree?
what it's called. Linktree,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, that's pretty much it because that's what I said. Like, do I or I write a book or I write a Patreon. I cannot do
I
everything. And nobody
understand.
can, like, and nobody can if you're going to do it right. Uh, so that's what I'm trying to do right now to focus in the next, you know, publishing
Mhm.
and the next baby. So
I
yeah.
think that's fantastic. Well, everybody who's listening, this has been a fantastic conversation with you, Laura. I'm so happy that you were able to come by. You were able to connect with me. You are welcome back anytime. I would love to just sit here and talk about all the stories and all the wonderful memories and everything with you. I think it would be fantastic. I am excited for your next book, baby, whenever it comes out. And everybody who's listening, go connect with Laura, buy Laura's book, check out her classes, her Patreon, all of those things. All the links will be in the show description. And everybody, take care of yourselves, be safe, and be good to each other. And we'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone. If you're a lover of Pagan's Witchy Corner, then prepare for some really exciting news. I have started a new podcast, Pagan's Reading Nook. Don't worry, I'm still going to be creating all the Pagan's Witchy Corner content that you all love. But as you all know, I have a huge passion and love of books, which has led me to create this new show. On Pagan's Reading Nook, I will be discussing the books that I'm reading, showcasing brand new titles, and sitting down with some amazing authors to talk about the worlds and the characters they've created. I will also be discussing new releases, fan favorites, and classic tales that have enchanted us throughout time. So, if you are a fan of this show, make sure you head over there and subscribe, and grab your favorite beverage, and join me as we dive into harrowing tales, seductive romances, and thrilling adventures in the fiction world.